Welcome back, everybody. Well, you know, some documents penned by former presidents are going up for sale just in time for this year's election. The auction will feature letters and manuscripts marking some of the most memorable moments in our nation's history, from George Washington's inaugural address to the terror attack on 9/11. Joining us now, curator David Lowenhertz, owner of the Lowenhertz Autographs, which is holding the auction later this month. It's such a pleasure to have you here today, David.
Thank you.
What I find fascinating about this auction is the fact that it offers a glimpse into our history and the fact that we have some amazing documents from some fabulous leaders from our past, including George Washington. And you have a fragment from the inaugural address that was a draft, so a discarded draft.
A discarded draft from Washington's first inaugural address that was saved by a scholar in the 1840s who people knew was working on Washington's collected works, and he was asked for souvenirs, and he cut up this manuscript and distributed the fragments, and that's why these still exist today.
Because a lot of folks would think that these would be in museums by now, but over the course of history, there have been private collectors passing these down to just different generations.
That's correct, and sometimes they've handed them down to museums, in fact. A lot of museum collections come from
In
collectors.
this fragment that you have from Washington, I would like you to read the portion that is most relevant to what's happening right now.
This is actually the very last fragment known from the draft of the inaugural address, and he writes, "While others in their political conduct shall demean themselves as may seem to them, let us be honest, let us be firm, let us advance directly forward in the path of our duty. Should the path at first prove intricate and thorny, it will grow plain and smooth as we go. In public as in private life, let the eternal line that separates right from wrong be the fence too," and then it breaks off.
It breaks off there, but these are words to live by, certainly.
Absolutely, yes.
Now, so this fragment, of course, I'm sure is no doubt, it's not inexpensive.
No, it's going up for sale on Wednesday, October 26th on invaluable.com, and it has an estimate of $130,000 to $150,000.
So for the serious collectors out there, this is a real gem in an election year that is quite polarizing right now. You also have some other amazing documents. You also have a letter from Franklin Roosevelt that he wrote to a child who was also suffering from polio.
It's a letter written right around Christmas time that FDR wrote to this young man whose name, I'll just quickly reference, is Edward Barker. And he became well known and famous in a way because the first feeder that enabled people with paralysis to feed themselves was tried on him, and it became known as the Barker feeder. So this was prior to the implementation of that unit, but because FDR suffered from polio and was at Warm Springs where this young man was, he sent him holiday greetings on White House Station.
Also fascinating, there's an 1864 document from inventor Samuel Morse of the Morse Code, who writes to someone who says, if Lincoln is reelected, then he will despair. He obviously was not a fan of Mr. Lincoln.
Not a fan of Mr. Lincoln. In fact, Lincoln at that time in 1864 was running against General McClellan, who was a somewhat dishonored officer at the end of the war, and Morse in fact writes, he says, "If McClellan and Pendleton are the successful candidates at the November election, I shall have hope for the country. If Lincoln is reelected, I shall despair."
My goodness. Well, you know, he was obviously very wrong, because Lincoln today, of course, is considered one of the best presidents, the greatest presidents of all time.
I think we're lucky we didn't have McClellan.
Absolutely. Also, John F. Kennedy, there is a manuscript from Kennedy on his New Frontiers speech.
Yes, this is interesting. It's a fragment from a speech that he gave, one of 16 whistle stops that he made in California in September 1960. And it was notes for the next speech that he was going to give at the Shriner Auditorium in Los Angeles. And he makes notes and quotes the New Frontier. And it was given to a young man who was very eager to get Kennedy's autograph. And instead of taking time to give the young man his signature, he simply handed him the sheet of notes. And this page has stayed with the family ever since.
That's an amazing piece of history to hold on to. But it is all going to go on the auction block. And for some lucky collectors, these are invaluable.
That's where it's going for sale.
Absolutely. And I think it's amazing. And thank you so much for sharing this with us, because it's such a treat to look back on history and learn some valuable lessons from those who've had an indelible mark on our nation's past. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.